feeling a lot better now, thank you. Okay, do apologise for the last meeting, but I was in absolutely no fit state to take that. So there we go. Hello, Daniel. How are you?
Good evening.
Good evening. And hello, Sue Littlemore. How are you?
Members, we're now live on YouTube.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, it's now half past 6. So just to kick off the meeting, I am Councillor Stuart Frost, Chair of Economic Planning and Housing, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting, which is being held virtually and in accordance with the Council's rule for virtual meetings, which reflect the recently published government regulations. This meeting is being streamed live on YouTube and will also be available to view after the meeting has finished. Councillors who sit on this committee are identified by name on the screen, and I will introduce the officers by name before they address the committee. Councillors are reminded that although this meeting is being held remotely, they are regarded as being present in a meeting of the council, and they should observe the normal rules of behaviour under the Member Code of Conduct and not allow members of their households to distract them during the course of the meeting. Can members please ensure that their mobile phones are now switched off or are on silent? Members of the committee will turn on their video link during the meeting and keep their microphones muted unless they have been invited to speak by myself as the chair. Members are reminded that if they switch off their video link or move away from the camera, they will be treated as having left the meeting and will not be able to take part in any vote taken on the item under discussion. Members can indicate their wish to speak by raising their electronic hand and should only speak when I, as chair, invite them to do so. The officers present will only switch on their video link during the item they are presenting or where they wish to be invited to speak by me as chair. As chair, I will confirm the name of any visiting speaker at the appropriate time in the agenda who will address the committee by the audio link. Councillors should declare that they are leaving the meeting and switch off their video link if they have a disclosable pecuniary interest or other personal interest in an item on the agenda. The councillors can switch on their video link when I call the next agenda item. Any voting will be taken by roll call, and I will confirm the recommendation proposed to the committee before the voting begins. Can each member indicate whether they are for or against the recommendation or whether they wish to abstain? Hopefully we won't have any IT problems, but can I remind councillors that if their connection is lost, they should immediately advise democratic support officers and use their meeting link to access the meeting again. Great, thank you very much. So if we have a quick look at the agenda, okay, we have some apologies for absence and substitutions. From the ones that I have at the moment is we have Councillor Carr, who's being substituted by Councillor Derek Mellor, okay, Councillor Carruthers, who's being substituted by Councillor Nick Robinson, and I also have apologies from Councillor Peter. Are there any other apologies or excuse me, or substitutions that we need to be aware of? No, okay, that's great. Okay, moving on to item number 2, declarations of interest. Does anybody have a declaration of interest that they wish to declare? No, okay, that's great. Okay, please be aware that members can declare an interest at any stage in the meeting. So moving on to item number 3, urgent matters. I've not been advised of any urgent matters, okay, unless Democratic Services have some since we last spoke. Ellie, do we have any urgent matters?
No urgent matters, Chair. Great,
thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to item number 4, the minutes of the meetings held on the 6th of January 2022 and the 13th of January 2022 will be approved at the EPH committee meeting held on the 10th of Feb. Okay, so moving on to item number 5, okay, presentation by the Local Enterprise Partnership. Okay, so Daniel, do you want to take this away? Or Leader, do you want to introduce?
Just very briefly, Mr. Chairman, I just would like to say I'm delighted that Kathy and Sue are here in my time as leader, but obviously before that I have been hugely impressed with their enthusiasm, their understanding of what the LEP's responsibility is, and the fertilisation of many projects across Surrey and Hampshire. We are very lucky to have such a able LEP. Not all of them perform as well as ours, and we are blessed to have Cathy at the helm, but supported by a great team who seem to understand what economic input means for our area. And of course, we do get the benefit of Cathy and the team being in Basingstoke itself. So I hand you over to them. They are much more expert in this than I. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Rattican, for those kind words. That was very nice. And in fact, I was actually in Basingstoke today for a team meeting. So a rather bizarre situation because your meeting was no longer face-to-face. I had to head home to Oxfordshire to pick this up. But if I can also, so I'm the Chief Executive of Enterprise M3. I'm with Sue Littlemore. Sue is our policy and strategic lead, but also importantly for you, she is our geographical lead for Basingstoke. And she is even more passionate about Basingstoke than I am. So that's good news. What we're going to do, Sue's going to share the slides. So I'm afraid I'm going to have quite a few Chris Whitty moments because she's going to move it on because we thought that was easiest than trying to swap slides halfway through. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction at the beginning. Sue's then going to give you a bit of insight into one of the major things we do, which is look at economic intelligence across the piece, gathering information not only from the set statistics, but also drawing it direct from business. And we have one of our critical roles is feeding up every single week into government what we see as the mood music of businesses, which has been fascinating over this last 3 years, as you can well imagine. And then I'm gonna we'll stop for a little bit of questions after that economic bit, just to see if there's anything in particular you want to ask. I'm going to pick up and say a little bit about the LEP and particularly how we're changing, but we want to particularly allow some time for questions. So we will move at pace, and Councillor Frost, if you want to indicate us to move quicker, please let us know, because what I don't want to do is use up valuable time, and I do want to get time to those questions. But I think you'll be pleased with what you hear about certainly the level of investment in Basingstoke, but also critically how significant Basingstoke is to the Enterprise M3 area. And I know that Ian and Daniel and Russell also know some, and Councillor Rattigan know some of the things that we're already working on about bringing in more investment into the area. So without further ado, if Sue could put up the slides, that would be really, really good.
So here we go. And as the slides come up, can I just quickly, something's happened here.
Just need to close that.
Thank you. Yeah, quickly say, this is off the record, Basingstoke is my absolute favourite council that I work with. You're absolutely, honestly,
being recorded, Sue.
I know. Oh, don't share it. One of the most go-ahead councils, absolutely, always has been. I mean that. So, right. Take it away. You'll have to say next slide, please, Cathy.
Right then, next slide, Sue, please. Now this is the map, and I won't dwell on this too much, but this is the area that we cover. So we're one of the biggest LEPs in the country, as you can see, spread right across Hampshire and Surrey, and you can see Basingstoke sitting there in the middle. We called Enterprise M3 because of the M3 running through our area, of which you will know much of the economy gathers around, and importantly spreads throughout that area right up into the London area. And importantly, you can see that money down, that amount of money in the left-hand side that represents not just the money we've put in, but actually the leverage we've got on the back of it. But if Sue, you could move to the next slide, please. I think at this point, Sue, I think you were going to come in now and say a little bit around the economy. I will then pick up later and say a little bit around the been doing, but I'll hand over to you, Sue.
Thank you, Kathy. So I'm going to introduce, go through quite quickly the latest data that we have collected on the Enterprise M3 area. This is the most up-to-date data from organisations like ONS and Resolution Foundation, etc. Fundamentally, we are a really high performing economy. We're high skilled, we've got high employment across the board and in high skilled jobs, high level value jobs. We're well connected to London and international ports and airports. Our businesses are diverse, and having that broad range of sectors is really important. It makes us much more resilient than regions that are dependent on single sectors like car manufacturing, for example. An important reminder to us and the government is that this area and the wider Southeast is one of only 3 regions that are net contributors to the Treasury. The EM3 area has had consistently bigger and faster growth than almost any other part of the UK over the last 2 decades. The tax receipts going into the Treasury, therefore, are much higher than any other part of the country. However, as we will see, there is no reason, and this is no time to be complacent, because these strengths and the firm foundation for our economy need deliberate and very actively to be cherished. And in the next few slides, it will become very clear why. Yes, we have been resilient to date, but to date we haven't been newly outside the EU single market and dealing with the pandemic. So what you see here is the latest data about business activity in the Enterprise M3 area. And orders and business activity are very volatile in line with the stop-start of the pandemic. And it's slumped quite heavily in the last 2 months in the run-up to Christmas, no doubt partly to do with Omicron, but it is quite a worrying sign. Inflation, I mean, this is well known, well publicised at the moment, but it's running at the highest rate for a generation at 5.4% in December. That absolutely defied Bank of England forecasts. The cost of living crisis, partly but not wholly caused by energy costs, that will depress consumer spending power. Inflation, together with the likely interest rates that we are almost inevitable rises, can choke off recovery and growth. Turning now to the labour market. The good news is the majority of our people in the Enterprise M3 area who want to be in work have found work. PAYE payroll numbers are rising and have risen. The bad news is the same. The majority of our people who want to be in work have found work. It's a really tight labour market and vacancies are vastly outnumbering applicants. Online job adverts have absolutely rocketed, gone up by more than 50% over the last year. I do want you to note, however, that one area of real growth for job vacancies is in the area of green jobs. These are jobs that are related to the environment on this particular graph. They have increased by 120% since before the pandemic. I always want to call this out because it does show that climate change all the time, which so much is sort of portrayed as a massive challenge. Climate change and going to a decarbonised economy will mean job opportunities and business growth opportunities for those forward-thinking businesses and organisations. This is a league that we publish every 2 months of the occupations with the highest number of vacancies. We have had employers from those top 3 at the top for a long time: nurses, sales and business development managers, care workers and home workers. And we have actually brought employers from all those sectors to the Enterprise M3 Skills Advisory Panel, which meets every quarter, to bring employers who've got skills challenges in front of universities and colleges and private training providers to see if they can work together to solve their problems. So employers are facing a big challenge with a great demand for people, and people with the right skills. And there are several factors conspiring against employers in this. One is that the recruitment pool has been shrunk by Brexit. We're finding a lot of employers complaining to us about that. And also that we have an aging population in this area. We have on nationally and also, I mean, generally in the Western world, but that is affecting our area. Also, what we have seen, and this is what this sort of called out, is that in the pandemic, as the pandemic runs its course, we are seeing a rise in the number of people choosing to drop out of the economy. Amongst young people, they are staying on in education or moving into education. Older, and this tends to be more amongst the less skilled, are taking early retirement, deciding to sort of change their life patterns and are stopping working. I should add that there are some local variations to that when we're talking about young people staying in education. Our evidence that we're collecting actually for a skills report shows that Basingstoke, Aldershot and Spelthorne are the lowest areas in the Enterprise M3 area for youngsters going on to university. You may or may not be familiar with that. That is not a new phenomenon, but that is a particular challenge in Basingstoke, which is different from the Enterprise M3 area altogether. And the way that we're working is changing. So we're, if you look at the colour bars represent the proportion of time working from home, and orange represents no time working at home at all. Pre-pandemic, orange is bigger, and not working at home at all is quite normal, was quite normal. By October later this year, that is much less normal, and people expect that hybrid working to be the norm. That's, I think, there's lots of other evidence suggesting this changing way of working. So it's not all positive. Remote working increases workers' hours. This piece of evidence from the Resolution Foundation suggests. And also there are some worrying gender balances, is that women are not getting their desire to work at home met. So I'm just going to sum up this little bit, is that I think that there's some really important messages to government here, actually, which are, you know, please don't be complacent about the ongoing strength of areas like Surrey and Hampshire, or the levels of tax receipt that you'll get there. We do need sustained investment to preserve, which is a fantastically strong economy, or with great potential. It's an innovative powerhouse. And the message, I think, to the rest of us from all this data is, how do we seize the opportunities of the great changes ahead of us? Net zero, different ways of training and education to address the skills shortages, different ways we want to work. And the LEP has been working with partners in all of these issues. And I think, you know, Cathy is going to give you a really good insight into the details of that.
Thank you, Sue. Councillor Frost, do you want me to carry on and whiz through the presentation, or should I want to stop now and take a few questions on the economy?
I think it would be good just to go through the presentation, and we take questions at the end.
Okay, we'll do that. one thing I want to stop before I go into this, Sue's given a really good indication of one of the key things the LEP does. Often people think about the capital projects that we've invested in, but we do a huge amount in gathering that intelligence together to inform what we do next. And we've been working very closely with the Basingstoke and Dean team, which I know you're going to hear more about in a moment. This at a glance sort of captures what we've been doing over this last year. And you'll see there, particularly in terms of the investment, but in both the local growth fund and also recently for the Getting Building Fund, which was to address some of the issues by COVID, that capital programme. That capital programme now has come to an end. And as from March 22, we will not have a capital.
Kathy, I'm sorry, you've gone quiet. Kathy? Oh, Sue, do you want to see if you can get hold of Kathy?
No, I'm just texting Kathy.
All right, thank you.
Just do that quickly.
Yeah, and we'll just hang fire.
I've texted her. Let's. I'm sure she's trying to
get back in.
Back in. Let me just pick up a little bit in that. I think Kathy was explaining that going forward, we don't expect to have the same levels of capital funding. We have got a little bit, by the way, to share. So the Wi-Fi. Yes, Kathy says her Wi-Fi's gone down. Please continue.
Okay, all right. Well, you're in the chair, Sue, so there we go.
But so in future, we're actually waiting for the government's decision on the future of LEPs, but we have quite a firm idea of our own future. We have got a little bit of capital funding to invest, 30 million over the next 10 years, and we see that as an opportunity to work with partners to kickstart some really important projects. We also have a growth hub that gives business support, and so business support we expect to carry on. Let me just get to the next one. This just shows actually the sort of investment that we have made, £45 million in Basingstoke over the years. I think I'm sure Basingstoke is the local authority we have invested the most amount of capital in, and that gives you the sort of range of projects from the electric vehicle training centre to the roads and infrastructure, and to a first in the South training facility at Queen Mary College in Esports. And we'll come on to talk about the enterprise zones as well, which are really important to the future of the area and Basingstoke.
I'm back now. My apologies. My Wi-Fi has gone down, so I'm now working off my phone. But hey ho, we've got used to all of these things, and Sue's been able to cover actually one of the most interesting slides there in terms of our level of investment. But if I can now pick up on the enterprise zone, you have got a very, very significant enterprise zone. Sorry, can you stay on the map for a moment? Within the area, we have a multi-site enterprise zone that covers 3 sites. The most significant thing around the enterprise zone site is not the fact that for 5 years, anyone that's been on there has had a business rate reduction, but it's importantly, anything we raise in terms of business rates income growth for the next 25 years comes back into the area. Now, we estimate that's going to be something like £111 million. That will be invested across those 3 sites, and not necessarily just on the sites, but actually in anything that is supporting the sites. That's very, very significant. And this was something we achieved through working particularly with yourselves, the other sites, and with the counties. If you can move on to the next slide, one of the things we've been doing is putting some investment into the site, and I know that you've heavily invested into the site. The important thing here is the quicker we can get some of those developments off the ground, the quicker we get that business rates income growth, and the quicker we get money to invest in other places. So that's significant. Next slide, please, Sue. And then I think the story goes on, and I think this is the important thing about Basingstoke, because Basingstoke and yourselves have been so up for actually taking the place forward. That has meant that on the back of it, we have been able to do innovative things as well. So you will probably know that we've got a big gigabit project. We're just about to go out and procure. It will run between Guildford and Basingstoke. And if Sue goes on to the next slide, you will see the route. Significantly, you'll see it's not a straight route, because actually we've chosen deliberately a low-cost route which we've already mapped out and had a lot of work done. So we've de-risked it for the developers. We are going out. We've chosen a route that perhaps people, particularly in telecommunications companies, wouldn't have chosen, and that's deliberate because we want to go out to those areas. This is going to make us really, really competitive, because once this is in place, we will be able to build off the back of it and spread out across the area. And our hope is that we will get a very strong profit share with the developer that we go out with, which will allow us, again, a bit like those enterprise zones, to further invest in the area. If you could go on to the next slide. I won't say much about this because I suspect Ian and Daniel will cover this later, but actually, again, because Basingstoke effectively is going to be the start, or it could be the finish if you turned it around with Guildford, of that fibre spine. Importantly, we are developing a living lab, 5G living lab at Basing View, which will have links into the University of Surrey, which is where there's a centre there, but also that 5G cluster in Basingstoke, and enable businesses to trial products. If we could go on to the next slide. As Sue has said earlier, we're doing a lot of work within Net Zero. And I think one of the things that I've been particularly pleased on this last year, we were finding that despite all the things said by government, ourselves and others about net zero, there are still a significant number of businesses that are unsure what they should do. So we have established a net zero business service. All businesses who work with us have the ability to take time out with our clean growth advisor, work with them. It has been an absolutely fantastic success. Depends on the business, on what they want, whether they want advice. We've linked them up with other companies. We've linked them up with other training organisations, but a very, very successful step forward, and quite frankly, quite cost effective in the way that it works. The next slide, please. I need to say, first of all, as I was running through it tonight, you know how you suddenly spot spelling mistakes? We have not invested 160 million. I think Anthony Beacott would fall off his chair at this point. It's actually 160,000 in there, so I need to change this, particularly as this is on YouTube. But this is an important development at Beacott about training up learners. And if we go on to the next slide, and you'll see there'll start to be a number of places where we are investing in innovation in the area, because this is very significant. working with the universities, investing in the Future Towns Innovation Hub, which is based at the University of Surrey Science Park, but is working with yourselves, the Health Tech Accelerator, which is bringing health companies together, and importantly, the work we do to work alongside high innovation private clusters. And if we go on from there, I'm just going to have a look at the time and see how we're doing. Okay. We've established a Hampshire and Surrey Space Hub because we've got a real strength across the whole area in sector and space and satellite activities. We were the first LEP to be recognised by government to take this forward. Again, I think this goes back to some of the things that Councillor Rattigan was saying at the very front of this presentation, and why we are recognised as being really forward thinking in the sorts of things we're doing. And this is all about helping businesses work together, actually particularly trade overseas, but also link up with other key sectors. Next slide, please. Coming back now to just say a little bit more about our Growth Hub. Our Growth Hub is the part of the organisation that particularly works with businesses and giving them support. That has played a key role, particularly throughout COVID-19. But equally alongside that, we have been doing a whole amount of work to actually put information out to businesses. And over the COVID pandemic, we were particularly putting out newsletters and information every single day to make sure businesses knew where to go to help, particularly how to come to yourselves to actually make, to apply for the various grants, etc. that was an offer. If you can go on to the next slide, these are the numbers of businesses that have helped by Growth Hub. And the next slide, please. Really pleased at the levels of satisfaction that we're getting back here. And one of the things that we are doing more and more of, we're running peer-to-peer support programs where we bring businesses together to work with other businesses, because one of the things we know is we need to help businesses become more resilient as we move forward. And one of the other areas we are working on alongside our other surrounding growth hubs is how we help businesses particularly access finance at this time. Next slide. We also have a loan and equity scheme. There's a number of companies that have benefited from this. I think several of you will know Razor Secure, very successful cyber security company. Baked In is also based in this area, another successful product that's been particularly achieved high levels of growth during the pandemic. But actually, when I look at the areas that are looking at loans and equity, it does link very much back to your own team within Basingstoke, because they work very successfully alongside us and our Growth Hub and our universities. What then happens is, and also Finance South East who run this, you then find actually that businesses are more readily going forward and accessing these services. Next slide, please. And then if we turn to skills and growth, and we're almost finished it now, so just to let you know, there's a couple of areas that I want to highlight here. If we go on to the next one, which is about the Innovation South Virtual Campus, of which BCOT is one of the colleges that works in that group with a number of other places such as Sparsholt, East Surrey and University of Chichester and Royal Holloway University. This has developed high quality modules of training for free to businesses, and again has been successfully taken up. And the next slide. We've also funded the Esports skills facility at QMC. That was one of the first projects to get off the ground in this particular area in the south, so we're really pleased around that. Next slide. And we also have, so if you like, that's the skills work. Alongside that, we've got an enterprise advisor network, which is people within my own team. We've got 7 people who work directly with businesses and schools. They don't work directly with young people. This is about getting businesses working with the schools, helping change and influence the curriculum, and helping them give those people that are the students that are there a better understanding of that world of work. They do particularly a lot of work with parents and governors, which has been really, really effective. Next slide. And then finally, these are just some thoughts of the future. And a lot of what I've spoken about there is about things that we've funded, or the first front of the presentation about things we funded through capital funding. As we've worked through those slides, it is more to do with the things that we're doing now and will continue going forward in the future. So that support to business, that support through that enterprise network, working with schools and businesses. The work that we'll continue to do, particularly intelligence, which we pride ourselves on, because it is the intelligence that feeds what we then need to do in the future, which is why we have decided, along with by a board, led by our board, that we want to put clean growth and net zero at the very centre of all that we do as we move forward. You'll see there we do a lot around promoting the areas competitive advantage, in particular. Sorry, slide. Can you go back to that slide again? Sorry, Sue. And I don't know if you're aware, but because of the work we did in space, Nano Avionics, one of the companies, deliberately came to Basingstoke because of the work within the area. And we are working at the current time with a number of investors who are interested in the area. Now, that's not the sort of thing that you'll see on the front page of newsletters, because that work, you will know, is highly competitive. But actually, again, through the effective way we're able to work with yourselves, we can really, really promote this area well. And I've got some high hopes of some of the things that we might want to pull off in the future. We do a lot in terms of that trade and investment piece and inward investment. I think that is really, really strong. So we tend to focus, if you like, on sectors and business. I think local authorities, yourselves and counties focus on place, and then we can bring the two things together. If you go on to the next slide, I think might be the final slide. And this really starts to think about where we go in the future. Our current situation is that we're waiting at the moment to find out for definite what our future role will be. So we're waiting for this marvellous white paper on levelling up, which I think is due next week, but I've had so many dates for this, I'll never know. And importantly, we will then get a feel for how much money we will have going forward in the future. I think one of the things that will determine what happens in the future, there will be far greater alignment working with local authorities. Now, for us, I don't think that is going to mean a significant change, because we work very, very closely with yourselves and the counties. But actually, we'll just have to wait to see how that pans out. And it would be interesting to get your views on how you would like to take that forward. I think at that point, Sue, I think the best bet if we take down the slides. So it is all about owning the future and seizing opportunities. Thank you for that. And we'd be really, really keen to take any questions from yourselves.
Okay, does anybody have a question? Councillor Mahaffey, please.
Thank you, Chair. Kathy, Sue, thank you very much indeed for that. That was very interesting, and I learned an awful lot that I didn't know. You mentioned two or three things right at the beginning. You said this, you made this comment about we're one of three areas that are net contributors to the Treasury. You also said that we have a work or a labour deficit, and clearly you guys are going to be working in the future to promote enterprise in this area. If you add all of those things up, it suggests there is the potential for inward migration into this area. The committee we're sitting in at the moment is doing a lot of work on our local plan, which is about developing our infrastructure and our housing. So my question to you is there or has there been any work done on sort of projections of future inward migration from other parts of the country? Or is the labour shortage that I understand is a national labour shortage, is that kind of fairly equal, or are we greater or lesser in this area? So it's all about sort of migration patterns in the future. Have you got any thoughts on that?
I've got some quick thoughts. Sue might come in with some issues. This is a national issue. That's one thing that I would say. I think if anything, we've got to watch actually losing people from this area to elsewhere, because if there is a lot of jobs elsewhere and housing is cheaper elsewhere, we could well find people moving outside of the area. But if I'm honest, we're in such uncharted territory. We're not entirely sure, but I think what we are going to do is we're going to have to address it. We're going to have to think about how we grow our own staff and how we skill people up, how we encourage our employers to skill those people up, and how we actually open up jobs to a wider labour pool as possible. That's what I'd say. But I don't know, Sue, whether there's anything you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think you have to come up with the problem with all different ways. I think inward migration is one way. No, we haven't. I haven't done any look at that, but I don't know if there's anything out there on that work. But I would say that one of the barriers to inward migration, Kathy alluded to, is that it's an expensive area to move into, and we know that that is a obstacle to business growth. I think these skills issues, though, we need to think about it in all sorts of different ways. There aren't enough people. So one thing we need to think about is, are companies and employers using technology in the best way that they could to mean that they are not so reliant on human labour? That's one thing that needs to be looked at. Going back to the Basingstoke issue is, are we wasting talent in our education system? Do we have a system that trains people for vocations? Do we put too many people into university because we don't have a good enough vocational offer? Why are there young people who have talent undoubtedly not choosing to go to university? What sort of other education and training offer could be brought in as an innovation which would capture those people? So there's all sorts of different ways I think we need to come at this problem, because what I hear from sector after sector is that the only way that businesses can fill their vacancies is poaching it off other companies in their sectors. That's in the public and the private sector. That is going to be no long-term answer. All that will do is push up wages and inflation. Really good question. We've got to come at it different ways with fresh thinking and good ideas, fresh ideas.
Thank you for that. That's really useful. Can I ask you, I know I'm asking you to look in your crystal ball, but if you do come across any research in your work, if you could fire it this way about migration patterns, about future numbers,
we'll look into it. We'll look into it.
That'd be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, what I've got is I've got Councillor McCormick, then Councillor Laura James, then Councillor Nick Robinson, then Councillor Conesco, and then Councillor Watts. So Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Chair. I've got three questions, really. The first one is on back in business through COVID-19, the Recover and Renew Economic Recovery Action Plan. One of the especially challenging things we've got in Basingstoke and is replicated in other places is the town centre. Accelerated trends due to the pandemic with online retail. But I think we have an opportunity here in terms of reviving our town centre to get new shops, new businesses, new startups, etc., especially looking at the green economy and looking at things like refill shops and repair shops and things like that. They're making a comeback. How much work are you doing in that area in the moment, and what could we look forward to in Basingstoke as a result of that? That's the first question. The second one is related to that. It's the net zero economy. how much work are you doing with Hampshire County Council and Basingstoke to try and get green infrastructure? We've declared a climate emergency. We want the entire borough to be carbon neutral by 2030, and the amount of work that needs to be done on that is massive. All our office buildings carbon neutral, our residential buildings carbon neutral, our transport systems carbon neutral, no new petrol or diesel cars, charging infrastructure at work, in the shopping spaces, at home. You guys tend to be very good at securing money for investment. Is there anything like that that we can look forward to in the near future?
Thank you, Councillor Cumming. If I can just ask you just to stick with the two questions first, and I will come to you, just so we can keep it rolling on. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll get Sue to answer that. On that last question, we have no longer got capital investment. So actually, one of the things, this is where we have got to really work together and make sure that we pool our resources and don't duplicate. But we have got a real task ahead of us in thinking about how we draw funding in to do that very important work around green infrastructure, which I agree, there's a lot to do. But let me get Sue to comment on the town centre activity, because I know that she's been working with the centre in Southampton.
Well, that's another really great question, and I'm so pleased to hear you quite enthusiastic about the opportunities of the net zero world, and repair shops. God, that would be great to get those in. Can I just say that one thing, we may not be able to bring that much money to the table, but we can really work with you to convene the sorts of partners across the area, the colleges, the universities, the private sector as well, to bring together the ideas and the possible investment and make a real case to those people who can fund things with you. That's one thing, and that shouldn't be undervalued, how good we are at doing that, and very enthusiastic about doing that, because we have evidence as well that we can bring to the table. One thing I would say about town centres, in our Revive and Renew action plan, we knew that we needed to take a look at the renewal part of town centres, and we put in an action plan to work with developers to put in co-working spaces in those areas, reflecting the new ways of working. And we have done that in a couple of areas in Hampshire and in Surrey. So we have indeed supported and invested in some new workspaces, which hopefully will also regenerate a town centre. You've got people working there. The project that Kathy alluded to is called the Future Towns Innovation Hub, which is a engineering based but innovation centre run by the University of Southampton on the Science Park in Chilworth. And they've done some initial work with Basingstoke actually. They are there to make towns in the Enterprise M3 area happier, healthier and cleaner and more prosperous places to live. So they come out using the power of the research of all the university departments, combined with business and industry and council leaders. And Daniel, I know, has worked closely with that. We were looking at trying to change transport in Basingstoke, getting more people to get involved in active travel on that. And we've done some work in Basingstoke with that. But I don't know if I've directly answered that question, but it is really an area that we really want to work with partnerships on, because these town centres and these places is where the business growth happens.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Councillor Laura James, please.
Oh, hang on, I had another question there, but I think it's been answered in part. I mean, I wanted to understand where we were going in Basingstoke with universities and science parks, because if we can't get the people in the industry and we're suffering from poaching, one of the ways we can do that is to grow our own talent through higher education. And I think we're at a disadvantage in Basingstoke that we don't have a university, and other settlements of a similar size do. And it brings young people in, and we have a lack of young people in Basingstoke. We have a lack of talent for some of these high skilled jobs. 20 years ago, we had lots of high skilled jobs in Basingstoke, a lot of big tech firms that have since gone. And I see the future as trying to generate that from within. I'd just be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Can I answer that and
Yes,
say we're on the case? I can't say anything more than that, but we are definitely on the case on this.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Laura James, please.
Thank you. I've got quite a few questions, but I'll just start off with a couple.
Thank you.
My first one is, we have a leader of a council is talking about the capital of the South, and it is talking about growth. And we have the LEP that's talking about economic growth. Does, from the point of view of the LEP, does economic growth mean more houses for Basingstoke? Do the two, is it necessary to have that? And I just want to explore that really with you. That's the first question.
I think I would probably say yes, because if you're going to have economic growth, you need that workforce, and you need the workforce nearby to the companies, and particularly where you've got big skill shortages, companies will go to where the skills are, and that's across this country. That's one of the things that we're going to have to watch for. What I would say is that housing needs to be affordable for the workforce. I think, again, Sue has made the comment around one of the things we've got to think about is how can we persuade or help actually employers use technology more, so actually effectively they're being more efficient. But I think we do know across the whole of the South there is a shortage of housing for the workforce, and that is a continuing issue. And if we want those companies to stay here, and if we want that talent to stay here, and that's the important bit, it's the talent we need to hold on to, that is going to be significant. And one of my worries now is, we ought to be thinking about the links into London, that when people come out, they will leapfrog some of these areas, because the pandemic has shown that actually location doesn't matter as much. So a lot of people during the pandemic were saying, oh, actually, this is going to really be good. We're going to pick up all these jobs from London. And all of a sudden, we're seeing some of those jobs going up to Yorkshire and places like that. So that's one of the things we just need to think about, which means that we've got to make sure that our places are attractive for the talent, which isn't just housing. It is that point about town centres and other places. But that would be my response.
Thank you, Cathy. Councillor James, if I can just stop you there and bring in Councillor Rattigan, okay, and then we'll come back to you literally straight after Councillor Rattigan, Councillor James. Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, that's kind of you. Laura, I think it is important that you understand what the difference between a capital means. A capital can be a capital of culture. We've often seen that portrayed across many places. Glasgow was the capital of culture previously. It is my ambition to make sure that we get a bigger bite of the economic cherry, and it is important that we invite people in who will improve the borough, who can use technology, who can use AI, who can support our youngest, because I think we have a young population. I don't know who said we don't. Our demographics are younger, and there is a need to make them better educated. I think if I had an offer at all, it would be to have through schools, not just stopping at 16. I think there is an incentive to do that, and that is why so many of our best and brightest go to West Berkshire or to Surrey for education. I think genuinely it's about harnessing talent, and we need to harness the best and the brightest within our borough. And if that makes us a beacon, our capital, then so be it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rattigan. Councillor James,
Coming back on that before I answer
Please
my
do.
final question, not my final, but if I just come back on that point then.
Sure.
I read the article that Councillor Ratcliffe referred to the capital of the South, and I'm very clear in my understanding, and many other people are, in what he was referring to, and he made it very clear as to what he meant by capital of the South. But what I was really wanting to pick up on, and I suppose it follows on from that really, is we've had a lot of discussion tonight about we. The word we was used a lot. There's a real democratic deficit in all of this, I feel, and I think many backbenchers do as well as many members. I've been a councillor now for 20 years, but in that time and since the LEP's conception, this is the second presentation we've had from the LEP. I'm amazed at some of the things I'm hearing tonight, but I've never heard it before. We've had no communication with you before. When we've had the first presentation from the LEP, we asked how do we actually influence the capital spend, and at the time it was significant. I know you've only got 13 million now that's left in the coffers, but before that it was significant. There really has been very little scrutiny or involvement of members. And the other thing in relation to the democratic deficit, I suppose, is you're on this journey of growth as a LEP, and we have a council leader who's talking about the capital of the South, but the reality is members now have voted twice that they do not support growth. So how do we now align ourselves, and where do we go from here if that's the case?
Capital James, can I answer that? Because actually, on the democratic deficit point, I totally understand that. One of the things we have in this area is something called a joint leaders board. So it is run by local authorities, which myself and the chair are asked to attend and actually present and be scrutinised on the work that we're doing. It meets every couple of months before each board meeting. That joint leaders board is made up of all the leaders, that's the county council leaders and the district leaders in our area. So I think that's 15 in total. The joint leaders board, we have to present not the exact proposals, but the criteria and approach in which we've distributing our funding, which we have done all the time. Every year there is a scrutiny held. It was held in November, which is all those authorities hold us, and so the chair and the chief executive attend that in November. Councillor Neighbour, who's the leader at Heart, chairs that. In the past it's been done by Councillor North. In addition to that, the joint leaders board decide who of the 6 representatives of our board from local authorities sit on our board. So we have 2 district representatives from Surrey, 2 from Hampshire, and a county council representative from Hampshire and Surrey. And they then are due to, they are meant then on your behalf to report back to the relevant councils. I think that, and the other thing that then happens, and I think this is significant, it doesn't happen in every other LEP, is the joint leaders board elects two people to sit on our programme management group, which is the group that decides on the projects up to 3 million that it is going to approve, and then which ones it's going to recommend to the board. It has been an absolute superb model. It is recognised by government, because what we are doing is deliberately working side by side with the politicians and lining ourselves as far as possible. I think actually you're going to see greater alignment as we go forward, particularly if we're now moving to a world of something akin to county deals or whatever that might be, about working closely together. So that is what we've been doing. Now, it may well be that that's not been articulated well enough so that people understand that. I take the point about actually getting information out. We put lots and lots of communication out. We're a very, very small team. We will come out whenever we can. If you wanted us to come out every year, we would come out every year, and that might be something we take on board, but that's the position that we're in.
Thank you, Kathy. Just hold on, Councillor James. Even just hold on, please. I've got you on my list to actually come back.
If I could come back on that point, if I could just come back on that point.
But no, I would like to move on, please, and give Councillor Rattigan a chance of reply. And then I'd like to bring in some other people. I've got you down to actually come back in, Councillor James, so you can pick up that point then and another couple of questions. So, Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Chair. The first article that was on the capital of the South was done in the summer of 2019 and was not the reported latest point. I never used the term capital of the South in that interview. It was used by the interviewer for me, and was not something I said. I used the term in 2019. Obviously, many things have changed since then, but I do hope that the reality of what you said, you don't want growth, is we do need growth because we've got to pay for things, and obviously no growth means that none of our residents are going to benefit from the economic upturn that hopefully comes as the end of the pandemic happens.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Nick Robinson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Very, very informative. You've spent a lot of money and invested a lot of money. I'd be interested to hear where your funding comes from and where you foresee it coming from in the future. Thank you.
So the capital funding has come direct from government. So it's come in the form of 3 rounds of local growth deals that we had to bid for. We bid for money, and in every single time we got more than our pro rata share. So we're in a really, really good position, and that is because we put forward, and the we in this is we took it forward, but actually the we working together was with yourselves. We're putting that bid together, and that was the successful partnership. So that's some of the money we've got. We, as I said, some of that money went back in loans, so it comes around, and I think that's been a very successful model because it has allowed us to reinvest in other types of projects. And often we're working alongside the private sector. I think we've also had £40 million of EU funds come into the area. I think the interesting bit of your question is where it's going to come from in the future. It now comes up as the Levelling Up Fund, which is one of those, the Community Renewal Fund, and then supposedly going to be released at the same time as the white paper is the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which is the follow-on fund from some of the EU funds. I think one of the things there is it is not clear how that's going to be distributed, either in terms of going out through, I think it will come out through local authorities, by the way. I think that's absolutely right. I think the interesting thing will be how it's geographically distributed. And I think, again, that's the thing we need to watch. And again, I think that's one of those things where I think there will be less funding coming out in the future. So we've got to be really quite clear how we utilise that going forward. And that funding will not come through us. I think the role we will play through the intelligence role is feeding through some thoughts and working with yourselves around where we think that ought to be going. But that money, I think, will be coming out through yourselves or through the county.
Thank you very much. Councillor Robinson, do you have a very quick supplementary?
No, it's been answered very fully. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Canesco, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Kathy and Sue, for the presentation. And I certainly would be very keen to hear you speaking to us on a more regular basis, and hopefully the other members and the Chair will agree, and we can try and sort something out. A couple of questions. One we've already touched on, and this is around higher education, university. You mentioned in your presentation that we're one of 3 locations in the LEP that seems to struggle to get people into university. We've spoken about the lack of a university here in Basingstoke as potentially one of the reasons for that. Is there anything else? And I'm conscious that you said watch this space, I can't say any more, but are there things we're doing that you can talk about that we'll hopefully aim to try and close that gap.
I'll probably ask Sue to, is Sue still here?
Yes, she is.
Yes, she is. Sorry, you've moved on the screen. That's what's Sue, do you want to come in on that? Because I know you do a lot of work on higher education, and you did a lot of work several years ago on looking at the population within Basingstoke and talking to universities.
So I think actually before, I think what Kathy was, the question that Kathy was answering before was about education and also about science parks, and I think one alluded perhaps to the science park aspect of that, which we can't talk about at the moment. But going back to what you said, is there's been a long-standing issue that there are some areas, some wards in Basingstoke where participation in higher education isn't like it is in the rest of Basingstoke, or indeed in the rest of Enterprise M3. We see this in pockets of Spelthorne and Aldershot, and that's very up-to-date information, but it's a long-standing issue. When we did work previously, the issue was not about talent or even educational achievement. These young people were getting the GCSEs, which should qualify them to go on to higher education, but they didn't want to. I have to say, we did a lot of work on this. The answer is not a university in Basingstoke. There are so many universities within striking distance of Basingstoke. They are all sort of happy to take on students. There are places. The issue is the type of higher education that is offered by universities, the type of courses, the 3-year sort of boarding school type courses is not what attracts these young people. They constantly said they wanted much more work-based and much more work-focused training and education. And that is where I think we need to think hard, and we did work with some employers, but that is the challenge, and I think we all need some government funding and support on this, because the DFE have models that aren't always flexible to this sort of type of problem. But it is not for want of a university in Basingstoke that these people are not inspired to go on to further training. We need to have an innovative approach to the type of training and offer for them.
Great, thank you very much. Do you have a quick supplementary?
I do, yes, please, Chair. And it's more about the operation of the LEP, actually. It's just to see what relation you have with other LEPs, particularly neighbouring LEPs, whether it's sort of quite adversarial because we're all competing for the same people and the same investment, or whether it's actually more collaborative because we're all working together for the benefit of the UK or for the Southeast.
It's definitely the latter. It's definitely the latter. So there's two things that happen. I am what's called the cluster lead for the growth hubs. So that's the growth hub of ourselves, Solent, Coast to Capital, and also Thames Valley Berkshire. That works as a group, shares information and pools activities. So we're just about to go out as a group of 4 to do a massive survey of businesses to see what issues they've got following the pandemic, so that we can then shape together some of the things we might deliver to them. Up until December, I was the lead chief executive of a group called Catalyst South, which are all the 6 LEPs across the South that have worked together on particularly articulating the needs of the South. And we've recently all submitted submissions into the recent APPG around levelling up, led by what I think it's SEEK. I can't remember which one it is. It's one of the Southeast groupings of local authorities. And the other thing that we did was we did a big event around airport communities to really highlight the damaging impact of the demise of Heathrow, Gatwick and others was having on the workforce and the businesses surrounding the area. It is collaborative. One of the things we recognise is that businesses don't work from boundaries. So actually, sometimes we will have a business that comes to us and actually it's far more well suited to be down, whether it might be in Southampton or Portsmouth or other areas and working together. But and we've got a very, very good relationship, and various staff work together. Sue's worked with a number of the people in the other teams, which is highly, highly effective.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Okay, Councillor Gary Watts, please. You're on mute, Councillor Watts. Still on mute. Still muted?
No, he's come off.
No, he's still muted. Councillor Watts, what I'll do is
I'm unmuted
there we go.
now.
That's better.
Pressing the wrong button. Sorry.
That's okay. No problems.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I found it very interesting, and I'd like to hear from you in a year's time to see where we are after funding has been cut and well, capital funding has been cut. Mine's quite a broad question, really, on the negative impact of Brexit, which has had on exporting British goods to the EU by increased tariffs and costs, transport costs. I mean, I work in a manufacturing sector, and it's now cheaper, quicker to ship direct from, we have a sister company in the States. It's now quicker to ship direct from the States to Europe from the UK to Europe. If this isn't addressed, it's going to make British goods uncompetitive. I just wonder what lobbying is the LEP doing to the government to address this issue?
We do a lot on this, and I'll probably ask Sue to come in, because one of the things that Sue does every week is put intelligence reports into government. So the LEP never directly lobbies. It's not its role. It will inform with facts about some of the things that's happening. I say that because you can lobby as politicians. We can't, but actually what we can do is feed in information, and the picture is very mixed. We certainly, through we've been working together over the last couple of years, and what we do is every single week we bring in all the business support organisations to talk to us and feedback about what's happening in the business community. And certainly we have been feeding back the issues around manufacturing, the number of places that have had to set up other premises overseas to get around some issues. But all I will say is not all negative. Some companies are coping with a number of things. We have our roles is to make sure that we keep businesses informed of all the changes in terms of customs and trades. And we've got the big trademark change coming up next year, which we've got to get people thinking about now, because that's going to mean changes to packaging and everything else. But I don't know, Sue, whether you want to add any further reflections on the things that we've been doing about feeding information up around Brexit.
Well, I would endorse absolutely everything that you said, but also to say to the questioner, sorry, I forgot your name, but the councillor, I'm sure you don't know that you're not alone in your experience. So weekly we meet with business support organisations to collect the sort of intelligence actually that you are shared with us just now. We do it anonymously from businesses and business sources, but it's that sort of thing that you are finding it cheaper and more effective to ship from the US than from the UK, and you're not alone in that. And also, I think I've already alluded to, a lot of our employers have complained in different sectors, whether it's in space and satellite or social care, that the Brexit has affected their recruitment capacity. As Kathy said, we don't lobby, but we feed this business intelligence into government, and we do that also in a series of MP meetings. So we meet regularly. We have a rolling programme of meeting with our MPs in the Enterprise M3 area. Some of those, as you know, are in government, in cabinet. Kwasi Kwarteng, for example, is one of our MPs, and we also share that sort of information with them. So we are a useful channel, and I would also always be really pleased to hear from councillors who might be working in businesses to contact us with what it is like on the ground.
Thank you very much, Sue. Councillor Watts, do you have a very quick supplementary?
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I'm involved in the UKCA marking.
Right.
So I know a little bit about that. I know the government delayed it, but we have to do it by the end of this year. Again, that's going to give massive costs to businesses. I mean, like our own. So we've got to deal with that, and we haven't got the manpower, the person power to deal with that either. So that's another challenge. So one sort of question, moving away from sort of broad Brexit, is you talked about the gigabyte link between Guildford to Basingstoke, that you're going to make a profit. Can you just explain to me how you're going to do that?
Well, we hope we can. Can I just Councillor Watts, can I just say on your comment that you were making about the CE markings, it'd be really helpful if in terms of that plea from Sue, because actually that sort of information, that's exactly the sort of information we need to feed up to government about the sorts of things that companies are facing. So I just want to leave that with you. And the profit share arrangement is that what I don't want to be in a position for, we've got 4.5 million from government as part of the Getting Building Fund that we can invest in a fibre spine. Now, I want to use that and get the very best value for that money. And if I can negotiate a deal with the private sector, which allows, rather than me handing over 4.5 million and they go away and build a spine and that's it, actually we, the bit larger area, get some money as a result of that, then that's what we want to do. And that's what we're hoping to do, is to get some funding coming back in on the back of that, which allows us to either reinvest further into the spine, which would be absolutely fantastic, and I think what's needed, or we might want to invest in other infrastructure. We won't know that until we get into the procurement, but that's what we're hoping to do.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Councillor Watts. Okay, I want to go to Councillor Vaux now, please.
Chair, a very interesting presentation, and well done for picking out the salient points for us rather than going through what could have been a long presentation, so I appreciate that. But one of the bits that interested me was the reference to international trade, and to be honest, I'd never really thought of Basingstoke quite in that light. So I wondered if you could tell us anything about how much international trade Basingstoke generates, and what are those competitive advantages that you were talking about? I mean, competitive advantages shift over time, and I suspect they're shifting quite a bit at the moment, post-COVID, post-Brexit, post all sorts of things. But I just wondered, what did you see Basingstoke offering for international trade as a competitive advantage?
Right, okay. On the first point on figures, I've not got the figures to hand, and actually, rather annoyingly, we get them on a very, very high level in terms of trade figures, and also sort of inward investment inquiries, and often the two are very, very, very close. I think on international trade, you would be really surprised, I think, at the number of companies who are trading. And that's significant, particularly around services, I would have said, around Basingstoke. There is a worry, and it goes back to the Brexit point earlier, that a number of smaller employers have decided to no longer trade. But actually, one of the big things we know is a really strong way of improving business competitiveness is to trade overseas. So it is really significant that we work closely alongside our Department of International Trade colleagues to work in that space. I think probably when I was talking about the advantages, it's as much to do with what I would call inward investment, which is can be about expansion of businesses, but particularly bringing in businesses from overseas. And what I see the advantages there are the South has huge advantages with the base here, and as Sue mentioned, the diverse business base here is one of our key strengths, because more and more you see sectors working with other sectors. And some of the work that we've done this last year is bringing together sectors with the net zero sector. So we know, for instance, that in the enterprise M3 area, we have 10% of the total number of companies who work directly in that clean growth centre. That is absolutely huge for this area. I don't know what it is for Basingstoke, but that's absolutely huge. And the sorts of things people are doing, it's not the big solar farms and it's not the big wind farms and things like that. It's all the systems work, it's the research work, it's the standards work, and the financial work. And you just look at that, the number of finance companies that are sitting within business in that sort of finance wider market, hugely successful, both here and overseas. And that is another real strength. And then if you drill down into some of the research and innovative work going on, I think there's some real hotspots that we could pull out and do far more across this entire area. And you see them coming up on Basing View. I mean, the fact that we've got Arena House, not Arena, it is Arena, isn't it? I've got 3 businesses there, and that's all about bringing smaller SMEs into work and being flexible. You know, we're based at Desk Lodge, being packed out today with people, really interesting, just talking about the number of things that are happening. And there's something here going on, and it goes back to what Sue is saying. You know, I think you could position yourself as something quite different from other places because of the makeup of your economy, because of the workforce, because of your positioning and everything else, and particularly on that sort of technological area. So I think there's a lot happening there. It's also something to do where you're sited. You've got London one side, you've got Reading on the other. You know, and you know, Reading, I think, is beginning to overheat. So there's some things there. There's some things that you could very well pick up on.
Thank you, Cathy. Sue, do you want to come in on that?
Well, just briefly, if I may, but really just to summarise what Cathy has said, I think you've got 3 main terrific advantages. I think you've got a quite fast growing high-tech sector. You need to shout about that, and we need to nurture that with you in that. I think you have got a fantastic location. You are this intersection from the south right up to the north and the Midlands because of your location, and it is a great place to live. And because it is close to London, close to countryside, close to the south coast. And I think you have to play those really hard, and you have to make sure that that is what you're known for, because those are real strengths. Shout about it.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, do you have a quick supplementary, Jenny? No? Okay, that's great. If you just like to lower your hand, please. Okay, I have one question before we crack on with the round 2 of questions. Okay, and that's on the key priority on the slide about leading the way in developing a net zero economy. Okay, you said that by the end of this year we'll have invested £21 million. Or the LEP will have invested £21 million in low carbon projects. Could you please just elucidate and expand on what projects you've been funding, okay, within the borough?
Right. Okay. I don't know whether Sue's got that information. I know. I'd certainly that will consist of. We've done a lot of sustainable transport type projects. That's across the whole of Enterprise M3. And I think there will probably be at least 1 or maybe a couple of those within the Basingstoke area. And I think they've been significant. And we have always done that right from the very beginning. We've also put in the training facilities that I was talking about, particularly around EV cars and the like, are actually one of the things that we're also doing in support of that, and some of the work that we're doing around skills. I'm just trying to think what else there is on the list. Sue, can you remember anything else
I
we've
think
been doing?
you mentioned there's the EV charging training facility at BCOT. The Future Towns Innovation Hub in Southampton University that I mentioned, it came out to Basingstoke, and we invested in a demonstrator to look at moving to active travel. That was called the Future Towns Mobility Demonstrator. That was a decarbonising transport project that we did with you. I'm pretty sure that the South East Energy Hub has been doing some work with Basingstoke on heat generation and sources, with some community projects in there that we have been working with you. We can get a fuller list for sure if you would like it a bit line by line, but those are some of the big ticket ones that I can remember off the top of my head.
Thank you, sir. I'd appreciate a written answer. Thank you very much. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the sheet now, and certainly we've done some sustainability packages, so we'll be able to do that.
Fantastic. Yeah, we just have a breakdown for just those projects that are in Basingstoke and Dean, because that's really what I'm caring about. Okay.
Can I just say my phone now is about to run out of battery, so if I disappear I'll come back again, but I'll just sort out.
Okay,
but I'm fine for the moment.
I understand that. Thank you very much. Okay, I'd now like to just quickly just circle back. Councillor McCormack, do you have any more questions?
No, I'm fine, Chair. Okay,
thank you very much. Councillor James, would you please?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, but I just want to come back on the comments that were made around accountability, really, and transparency. And obviously, I didn't know about the joint leaders meetings that took place, and that's not cascading down. So I think there's a big piece of work that could be done to look at how you communicate. And I think it would be good if you come back every year, but I think it may be something you need to think about before that year's up. And I'd welcome you thinking about how you could do things differently, because for example, I was interested to see that county got £33 million. You know, how did those decisions come about? Were we linked to those decisions as a borough? But clearly, I think there really is a deficit in relation to this transparency, and I'd welcome that the LEP looked again at that. And I guess it's also about our representatives, and I don't know who our representatives are on the LEP, and how they become more accountable to us, or just communication, really. And the other one I wanted to ask about is about, you made reference to women, and there's still a disadvantage of women in relation to the workplace. What it is that you're doing to address that issue, and what more could be done going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Kathy, before your phone runs out.
It's right. So I've charged it up now, so we're okay. Good. On the, just so that you know, the representatives on our board from Hampshire are Councillor Humby from Hampshire County Council, Councillor Millard, who's the leader at East Hampshire, and Councillor North, who's the leader at Test Valley. So they're the representatives on that. And I'm sorry, my mind's now gone. Just
on the LEP. Who's on the LEP from Basingstoke?
They're on the LEP board.
They're on the board, and do you?
You mean they're the local authority representatives on the board? All right, and then your second bit of the question, just remind me. I've picked up your point about transparency and communications. And
the other one is about women.
Oh, women. That was it. That's all I need. So I'm glad you've asked that, because we've got I think it's something like 40% of our board are women. So it's something I'm really passionate about, and our board is really passionate about. One of the things that we have done, particularly over this year, is we run some peer networks for women entrepreneurs. So we brought them together. We also always make sure that events have got equal women to men on them, and do a lot of work out there, and particularly look at how we engage with businesses. Some of our, I can't remember the exact fund, but some of our EU funds have been directed towards women to actually help them in getting back into work and skills training. So we have put a particular focus on that. But one of the things, as Sue was saying, some of the analysis we're starting to get back is really interesting about the impact of the pandemic on certain households. And certainly I've been sitting on the widening inequalities and the impact of COVID on an expert panel session, taking evidence over 6 series. That has been absolutely horrific, the sorts of impact it's had, particularly on disadvantaged groups. I think that's going to pose us a number of questions about how we actually reach out to them and support them.
Thank you, Cathy. I think Councillor James's question was more on, and please forgive me, Councillor James, okay, was on one of the slides you had about gender barriers. Okay, women with children have the greatest unmet desire to work from home, and I think probably one of the part of the question was, what are you doing to overcome that barrier?
I think in terms of what we're doing, so our role there is around informing and influencing, so making sure groups as yourselves, working with the EDOs and the like, are aware of that as an issue, and in particular that we start to talk to whether it's employers about working practices, because I think that's going to be a big debate over this next year, or if we particularly go and talk, we have a principal, all our principals get together regularly, talk to them about what they can do. We ourselves don't hold a pot of money to run skills type projects. One of the things Sue does very successfully with Barney Ely, who is one of the big HR directors at Hayes, has a skills advisory panel which brings businesses together to talk about some of these issues. And actually it might well be in the future that sort of theme is one of the things we pick up as part of that skills advisory panel.
Thank you, Cathy. Councillor James, I'd just like to move. Just hold on, please, because I've got Sue Littlemore that would like to come in probably on that particular answer for you. Okay.
Yes, Councillor James, I just wanted to emphasise that it was important. That is the point of it in a way, is to shine a light on these issues. That's why I included that in that research. Another bit of research that we are doing, I'm just about to publish soon, is a skills action plan with some data about the skills, strengths and needs across the area. And for the first time, I'm including a diversity section in that. That includes information about the fact that women are overrepresented in low-skilled jobs in the area and underrepresented in high-skilled leadership roles. So part of our role, as Cathy was really explaining, is to shine a light on these things. We can't pull all the levers to make things better, but what is very important, that you now, amongst and including your councillor colleagues, are at least aware of that and can start thinking about how we might tackle these situations together, these inequalities together.
Thank you, Sue. Councillor James, I'll come back to you in a minute. I've got Councillor Rattigan that will probably want to actually add to that point, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor James. Councillor Rattigan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that one of the reasons that we have not been able to have some of these meetings is that the white paper on levelling up, which was due September last year, has obviously not been delivered, which will outline what may come for the future. And it may well be that economic prosperity boards are envisaged. So through you, Chair, I would like to make the offer, and it's right that Laura holds us to account for this, is that we come back once the white paper is printed to give you a sense of where the economic drivers of Surrey and Hampshire are, and give you some ideas of where that money is, what it is, and what it's trying to achieve in a levelling up environment. So I'm happy to do that, and I'll attend an EPH to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rattigan. I'd like to accept your offer there. Councillor James, have you got one more question? Because I've also.
So it was in relation to the question is also, sure. For example, just in relation to accountability, is like, how did county get the 30 million? What did they spend it on? And I'd just quite like to understand that a bit more, really. For me, that, you know, what did that go on, and who made those decisions?
I need to understand what slide we're referring to, and then I might well be able to answer. Slide 11, did you say?
I'm not sure what slide it was. Sorry.
All right. No, apologies. I can whiz through. I suspect it will be a transport project of some sort, because I should say, for the local growth fund, we always put out a prospectus, being very, very clear about.
Excuse me, Kathy, slide 15.
50. Oh, thank you ever so much. Let me just have a look. Almost there.
It's titled the EM3 Investment in Basingstoke.
I'm still struggling with where the 30.
Okay, where it says the total EM3 investment was 44.9 million.
Yeah.
Chair, with your permission, can I suggest it may have been two of the roundabout?
Oh, I've got you. Yes, I've got you. It's the top left-hand box. Yes,
correct.
It will be the large infrastructure projects around the various roundabouts within Basingstoke. So that will have been the funding, and what would happen there is Hampshire County Council will have put in the proposal, because of the lead they've taken on that, but often in conjunction with yourselves. And certainly Councillor Sanders would have been the leader at that time, and I can remember him particularly talking about some of those particular projects. So I think that's exactly how that's made up. But we could give you, when we come back, the details of something else we were going to give you some details on. I think it was in relation to low carbon. We can set out exactly how that's made up and the sorts of things that we funded.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor James, would you mind? I'm assuming you have another question, but would you mind if we were? Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Councillor James. Councillor Mellor, please. You're on mute, Councillor Mellor. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a little bit belated now, about 10 minutes on since Councillor James raised that issue. Yes, that 33 million, a substantial element of that did go to Basingstoke in the form, I think Ken Rattigan was referring to it. I think at the time it was Chinham and the dam and Black Dam, and a little bit of Thornycroft had come into that. Basingstoke does exceedingly well, and congratulations to them in going for that. They've got a perfect infrastructure around the town, and that is thanks to the LEP and your efforts. So Councillor James should not feel frustrated by the fact that the figure of 33 million looks so impressive against the direct monies that went to Basingstoke. Believe me, Basingstoke, we did very well on that. Very well indeed.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mellor. Does anybody have any more questions before we let the team from the LEP go? No? Okay. Kathy, Sue, I'd just like to say thank you very much for attending. Okay. It was a really good presentation. It has obviously sparked quite a lot of interest. Okay, and look forward to getting those two written replies. Okay, so we can get those attached to the minutes. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you can leave the meeting now. Leave the meeting now. Okay.
Thank you very much for that, Ten. We enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us, and thank you for all your questions.
It's a pleasure. Okay, members, the time is coming up 8:10. It's normally good practice to have a break for 5 minutes after an hour. I didn't want to interrupt the flow of questions. Okay, so I've allowed it to go on, but I would like to have a 5-minute break so everyone can stretch and readjust their eyes, etc. So come back in 5 minutes, please. Thank you very much.
It's easy.
You live again, no?
Right, members, welcome back. We're just waiting for a couple of the people. Ellie, is it possible we could bring in Daniel and Jack Kennedy, please?
Yep, they should be available.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, Jack. Hello, Daniel. Okay, so it's great to see you.
Members.
We're just waiting for Councillor Rattigan. Give him another 30 seconds, and then he'll join in. There he is, Councillor Rattigan. Okay, what I'd like to do is welcome to Jack Kennedy and also Daniel Garnier. Okay, I'd like to hand over very quickly to Daniel first of all. Okay, and then we'll move to Jack for the paper, along with the leader for any comments. So, Daniel.
Yeah, sure. Good evening, members. Kind of just to let Jack speak, really. Kind of tonight, I've been giving you an update on the economic recovery framework and the activities and achievements we've had over the last few months. But also, I would like to say that unfortunately, for me and the council, it's actually Jack's last day at the council today. Jack is moving on to take a position at Surrey County Council, which I think is great news for him, but not so much for us. And I just kind of really to say a massive thank you to Jack for all his hard work, over the last 3 years at the council, all the great work he's done with our partners, supporting our economy. So Jack, thank you very much. And now I'll hand over to you for your update.
Great, thank you very much, Jack. Sorry that you're going. Good luck for your future, and please take us through the paper.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for those words, Daniel. So I'll just share my screen. I believe I've just been given permission to do so. So, yeah, as Daniel said, I'm Jack Kennedy. I'm the Economic Development Manager, Basingstoke and Dean. So hopefully I've met most of you through previous EPHs or through other engagement, and apologies if I haven't met you, and now I'm off as of tomorrow. So, but I wanted to provide an update on where we stand in terms of our economic recovery framework, the work that we have done, and the work we've done to support businesses and those who and our resident workforce, really, across all the different themes of our economic recovery framework. Now, I'll try to minimise the sort of duplication across the presentation you heard from the LEP, and clearly what I'll be trying to do is try to bring that into a much more local focus rather than the regional EM3 focus, but there will certainly be a bit of overlap in terms of some of the themes around the labour market and issues around skills and some of the topics that were raised in that useful discussion earlier. So just starting off with the sort of context of where we are, and this is quite a complicated slide, and it's something I shared at the last update in March 2021 to give a sort of flavour of just the amount of different restrictions and periods and lockdowns and rules changes that businesses have had to go through since March 2020. And it's clearly been an extremely difficult period for businesses, both within Basingstoke and across the UK. Now, if we extended this to out to where we are now, we clearly will have seen that we've had the reduction in restrictions and we've moved away from Plan B, and we're hoping to move to what we'll try to call a new normal or something close to that. However, we know that behaviours by customers, behaviours by businesses, it continues to be impacted by the high numbers of cases, and that confidence in the market continues to be impacted by the Omicron variant and some of the associated impacts that's happening both locally and nationally. One of the key indicators that we can see in terms of what's happening locally is around the unemployment rate. And this graph gives you an overview of what's happened since June 2019 up until the last data that we have in December 2021. And you can see that broadly we have tracked the same trends that both across the county level and a southeast level, and even across the national level. That sharp increase from March 2020, sort of consistently high levels of unemployment throughout 2020, slight increase again in terms of the last full lockdowns back in January to March last year, and then a steady decrease ever since April 2021. We are not back at the level we were in mid 2019. In terms of the rate, we are now at 2.9% in Basingstoke and Deane versus sort of average around 1.6% across 2019. So there is still a way to go to get us back to that level. And probably the area that we've seen the most significant increase when we think about different age groups is the impact that it's had on 18 to 24-year-olds in Basingstoke and Deane. And significantly, we've also seen a faster decrease in the area over the past sort of ever since about April 2021, post that last lockdown. And we now stand at a rate of about 4.6% for the 18 to 24-year-olds as compared to what we were tracking at before the pandemic, around 2.9%. So that, again, there is a way to go locally for us to come back down to where we stood before the start of the pandemic. One of the key things I think worth mentioning here is obviously we are tracking at a higher rate than the Hampshire average, and I know that might be of concern to councillors, and it's worth considering sort of some of the reasons behind why that might be, and that's both at a sort of overall rate and also particularly for the 18 to 24-year-olds category. Now, when we look at the younger age groups, I think a significant proportion or significant reason why we have higher rate of unemployment across those age groups is that the type of sectors that have been particularly impacted within Basingstoke and Deane around hospitality and retail, which is our most significant employer as a sort of overall sector, has obviously had a devastating impact throughout 2020 and in 2021. And these are the type of opportunities that typically provide, type of sectors that typically provide opportunities for younger people. And we are seeing less employment through those sectors than we have done in previous years. I think another key point to think about is about demographics. And when we look at the amount of economically inactive people in Basingstoke and Deane versus other areas that have higher, also better levels of unemployment across the 18 to 24-year-old age groups, we're seeing a lot less people economically inactive in Basingstoke and Deane. And what that means is that, as has already been noted, there are less people going into full-time education beyond the age of 18. But also there are a lot less people in Basingstoke and Deane being long-term sick or even short-term sick or going into retirement than we're seeing in other councils. we've got a higher pool of people who are either economically active and working or seeking employment. Therefore, it's probably more likely that we will see a higher proportion compared to lots of areas that in terms of unemployment. So it's really important when you think about that, demographics makes a huge difference in terms of unemployment rates. And just because we might be tracking at a higher rate than Hampshire doesn't necessarily mean that we aren't taking actions and having an impact in terms of the unemployment of 18 to 24-year-olds and across the whole age range. When we talk about the actions there's a number of things that we're doing to specifically combat unemployment for 18 to 24-year-olds. And I think some of the key things outlined in the paper around the Tri-Borough Youth Hub support that we're doing, working with Rushmore and Hart Borough Councils to provide intensive support to 18 to 24-year-olds, and that's both for an online provision and also physical provision when possible. And the online provision is due to start on Monday, with physical sessions starting from the 10th of February. And that will bring together people, businesses who are looking for young talent, but also sector specialists who are able to sort of support people who are considering moving into different areas of work, be that construction, be that digital, be that manufacturing, whatever it might be. We'll be using that hub as a place to bring both business and education together, and also those people who are unemployed and seeking work. So that will be, hopefully we'll see a significant impact through that. We've also got the Apprenticeship and Skills Hub, which has been operating for about 8 months now, and that works with businesses to understand their skills needs and try to assess where they can take on apprentices within their organisation. And obviously that creates opportunities both for new apprentices to be taken on, but also for upskilling existing staff. And it's worth remembering that as the planning authority, we also have control over things such as employment and skills plans. So whenever big developments come into the borough, we're able to attach conditions that mean that both jobs and apprenticeships and training sessions and all these things that are going to enable both young and old people to take on work with, through the construction phase of the development, where we're able to put conditions on those that means that local people are provided with opportunities through that. I just, whilst I'm on the sort of young people talking about, I think a point was raised earlier about skill levels and the fact that we're seeing reduction in skill levels, particularly in young people. And just to combat some of that, what we do see from data is that those with MVQ levels, MVQ level 4 and above, which incorporates sort of degree, higher diplomas, those kind of levels, we've seen an increase from about 26% in 2004 up to 44% in 2020, the latest data available. So actually a significant increase in terms of residents in our borough who've got higher skills than they did 15 or so years ago. So that's obviously a positive move, and we've seen a particular increase over the last few years, which is great. And I think part of that is down to some of the work around engaging with apprenticeships and enabling people to take on degree apprenticeships and higher apprenticeships so that they can do the things that Sue was talking about earlier in terms of having that work-based opportunity whilst also developing their skills and learning. Now, if we go into this slide, this talks about sort of the labour market demand, and this is a similar slide to some of the data that Sue presented earlier. We're seeing significant increase in the number of jobs advertised within Basingstoke and Deane. This top left graph shows you from sort of January 2017 all the way through to December 2021, the number of jobs advertised within the borough, and it's typically trended at 8 to 10,000 roughly, sometimes higher, sometimes lower, and obviously a significant decrease throughout the beginning of the pandemic. And that has not picked up until the latter half of 2021. But we are now at a place where we're seeing unique job postings of around 14,000. We've got to take this data with a pinch of salt. It's not necessarily saying there are 14,000 jobs available right now in Basingstoke and Deane, but it does give you a sort of an idea of the trend of how many postings there are out there on labour market sites, how many jobs are being advertised for local residents. And we are now at a much higher level than we've ever seen before. And we look at the type of jobs those are. So when you think about the top 10 occupations in demand, it's a lot of similarities with the Enterprise M3 data here. But some of the things that is great to see is that programs, software development professionals, a high skilled, generally high wage job is up there as number 3. And ICT and telecoms professionals also at number 8. So that sort of digital sector that Sue spoke about and Kathy spoke about, that we have, that strength that we have as an area, is showing itself through the type of jobs that are in demand in Basingstoke and Deane. And you can there see some of the actual job titles that are requested in the area. The bottom left chart, I won't go into a huge amount of detail, but it just shows the type of skills that those job adverts are looking for since about November 2019 up until November 2021. And I think one of the interesting things there is that what the skills that are being looked for are not hard skills. They're not sort of particular coding skills or anything like that. They are generally softer skills, those customer service, communications, enthusiasm, leadership, those things. So these are all elements that actually can be learned and can be taught, but also rely on that sort of the individual. Partly, it's not just about sort of qualifications that the businesses are looking for at the moment. Moving on from sort of the labour market side of things, when we talk about the support that's been provided to businesses by Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council since the last update, which was in March 2021, some of the key areas that we've funded has been through the Restart grant. So we distributed nearly £7 million worth of support to 784 businesses. We also provided 700,000 to 164 businesses via the additional restrictions grant. And also we allocated a further 150,000 to the apprenticeship grant scheme, which works to incentivise businesses to take on apprentices, both new apprentices to them and to upskill existing staff. So it provides a £5,000 incentive in terms of the recruitment and retainment of that apprentice. So that's one of the ways we're trying to support businesses in terms of taking on new staff, but also developing their existing workforce. And right now, we've been working very hard over the last few weeks to distribute 1.3 million in Omicron hospitality and leisure grants, and a further 1.1 million in additional restriction grant. And we think we're going to be able to add to that potentially another 400 or so thousand to provide support, because we've seen overwhelming demand from businesses in the hospitality, leisure, personal services sectors that really need significant support at the moment. It's worth also noting that we will also be providing a further 4.2 million of business rates relief support for the current financial year, and that will be provided to businesses over the next few months. And overall, the package of support that we have given out to businesses has been worth over 90 million since March 2020. So significant amount of funding has gone out to support our local economy as we've gone through the pandemic. This is a slide I know I've shared before, but it's just a reminder of sort of the key themes that we've got within our economic recovery framework. And I don't intend to linger on all of the achievements and individual strands of what we've done since the last update in March, because I think hopefully we'll have all seen the paper and it's set out there. But there's a few things that is worth just reflecting on. And I think I've mentioned one already, the launch of the Tri-Borough youth employment support service. I think that's going to be really important going forward for our young people within Basingstoke and Deane. The work we've done on the success of the Borough Basket, which is our e-commerce marketplace, which has supported 65 businesses. Now, when we look at the grand scheme of things, 65 businesses in a borough that has nearly 8,000 businesses doesn't seem a huge number, but we are talking about the businesses who typically have been the furthest away from providing a digital e-commerce marketplace themselves, and have required a high level of intervention to support them to move on to that. And if they hadn't been able to adapt during times of lockdown and restrictions, they might have struggled even more than they did. And we're now seeing roughly about 300 visitors a month to that marketplace. And again, more can be done and more will be done to promote that and get more users, but it's a sign of the support that we're providing for really some of our smallest independent retailers. 41,000 people have been reached through our outdoor arts program. So this is under the place shaping theme, where we're looking to strengthen our communities, to improve our neighbourhoods and diversify the town centre. And our outdoor arts program has delivered about 38 events since May 2021. So that's at least one a week since that period. And we've seen significant increase in footfall when we've had events, such as our Borough Basket Street Market, and some of the work done through the Basingstoke Festival and the Diwali lights parade that we had. All of those things have helped some of our town centre retailers, because more people have been attracted to the town centre and then go on to spend their money at independent retailers across the town centre. We obviously want to see track that more, and throughout the next year we'll be continuing to track what the footfall impact has been, and particularly thinking about how it will come back to the levels that we saw back in 2019, because of that sort of reluctance, understandable reluctance by some people to come back into the town centre. Just some other highlights worth talking about: the low case project, the low carbon across the south and east project, which is a green economy project to support businesses to access funding. And as a partner, we're enabled to support our businesses in the borough to get up to £10,000 worth in grants to support them to do green projects. And that could be anything from changing their lighting systems to developing sort of, as a brewery, you might develop completely different heating systems for the work that you're doing. Or as I said, a lot of companies are using it to make sure they're reducing their carbon emissions through the lighting or heating within their buildings. So that's a project that we're going to really focus on over the next few months to try and give that greater impetus. We've already seen success through that project, but we want to make that bigger. And we've seen some work done on the Green Homes Grant local authority distribution scheme, which has seen, I think, 17 projects delivered in the borough, and there's a further pipeline hoping to be done before the end of the scheme at the end of March this year. Now, I know when we talk about activity and things that have been delivered, and of course there's a cost associated with a lot of that, and it wouldn't surprise me that it would be of interest to councillors to understand where some of that funding has come from. And a lot of funding has been external. So we've got the additional restrictions grant, which is really there to support businesses through both periods of lockdown, but also in terms of wider business support activity, whether that's taking on apprentices or doing business events to support their learning and knowledge. We've got the Welcome Back Fund, which is focused on town centre reactivation activity. We've already heard from the LEP and their investment in Basingstoke, and particularly into the 5G Living Lab, which will be going live later this year. And then we do have an internal economic recovery fund, which to date has been used to support an outdoor hospitality seating grant scheme to enable our town centre businesses and those outside of the town centre to fund sort of renewed and better outdoor seating, to particularly through those periods where there were restrictions in terms of the numbers they could have internally in a venue. We've continued our contract with IncuHive Business Support, based in the town centre, but providing support to businesses all over the borough. And they've supported 55 businesses this year. Our town centre Wi-Fi, which gives us data around footfall and understanding where people are going and dwell time and information like that, but also providing a service to users because it provides free Wi-Fi. And also internal resources that we've been able to allocate within the economy and culture team in particular to support this agenda. Now, in terms of the amount we spent against that economic recovery fund, it's not very substantial at the moment, primarily because we are trying to maximise the use of the other grants that we have. So all of the additional restrictions grant, the Welcome Back Fund, they have time-bound restrictions about their use. So we want to maximise their use before we start to use our own funding. But going forward, we'll be able to come back to you and tell you about the spend against the Economic Recovery Fund. So what does the future look like? Where do we go from here? Critical that we finalise spending of those grant schemes by the 31st of March. We want to make sure we are utilising all of that money. Otherwise, it is clawed back by government, and we want to provide the greatest level of support we can to our local businesses. We will be delivering a business festival later in the year to support sort of networking, learning opportunities, providing sector support for particular areas, and leadership support for business owners as well. So that will be happening later in the year, and we hope to coincide that with some of our business support programs that we'll be looking to fund. Thinking about how culture plays into economic growth, and the new framework for culture in the borough will be going through its appropriate scrutiny channels over the next few months. Thinking about our approach to inward investment, Sue mentioned in particular the sort of three assets that we have around the tech sector, our location, and our connectivity. And I think we're going to think about how we, in light of COVID and the impact it's had on where people work, how people work, we need to think about how we're going to continue to attract inward investment in businesses. We've got the 5G Living Lab to go live, and we will continue to focus on the town centre because that's obviously a critical area for Basingstoke and Dean. And not mentioned on the slide, but also very important, is what's been mentioned around where future funding comes from, whether that's the Shared Prosperity Fund, the Community Renewal Fund, Levelling Up Agenda, all of these different pockets of money. We don't know yet exactly how they'll be distributed, how they'll be allocated, and how Basingstoke and Dean will fare as an area compared to other pockets of the UK. So hopefully a bit more understanding will come when the white paper is published, and that will give us a better understanding of how we'll be able to invest in some of our areas of economic growth and recovery in the future. So I think that's all for now. Stop sharing my slides.
Thank you very much. Okay, thanks for a great presentation as usual, Jack. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, and I'd like to add my thanks to Jack for his efforts for us as a borough and his enthusiasm in everything he's done. I was sorry to see him leave. Firstly, I just want to quickly pick up on a few points, if I may. I'm grateful to the group leaders and to you as councillors for your support when we put up £1 million for our Economic Recovery Fund. There was very little argument from you. You could understand why we were allocating that money from our budgets. I know sometimes I get criticised for not spending money, but it is important that we've got that in the background while we go through all the government money that has been allocated, which is, as Jack confirmed, time bound, and we need to get that out the door first before we spend our own money. It's better to spend somebody else's. A number of points, if I may. Firstly, now the LEP have left, I can reveal that we are speaking to the University of Surrey to make greater strides in our education piece, to make sure that some of their work is done here rather than in Guildford or any of their other campuses. So that will be exciting news as it transforms us. As has been pointed out, the retail and hospitality sector suffered most, and therefore our youngest, who normally pick up those jobs, have suffered the most. And there is no doubt that is painful. We all know that bars, clubs, nightclubs, venues are all quieter than they would have been had the Omicron variant not delayed the refiring of our economy, and it delayed things that would have been important to moving our economic piece forward. So upskilling, retraining, those things disappeared as people disappeared from our world. But I can pledge to you, as I'm speaking to Urban and Civic tomorrow, that the Manidown project will have a skills centre that will help those who want to go into the building world, not just the young, of course, but those who might be changing careers. And we all know that is quite prevalent in our world, because I believe in the localization of job opportunities. If we are going to meet our climate change goals, we need to make the travel to work time less than it currently is, less reliance on the car, more walking, more cycling to job opportunities. And that's why the economic piece is so vital to our young, but to all of us, to make sure that everybody gets a slice of that economic prosperity. So I think there is a lot to encourage us. Obviously, we have gone through a period of time where we have lost retail. We do need to repurpose and refocus on what those jobs and those skills need to be. And it will mean that some people will have to change where they are in terms of employment. But I do believe that we will give them the best opportunity to do that. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Rattigan. Leading questions from members. Councillor James, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to ask about the 18 to 24-year-olds and the increase in the unemployment. I just wondered if, in relation to timescale, do you have an indication of how long these people have been unemployed for? Is it, what sort of time frame is that? And also I wanted to ask about women in relation to slides. How long, we had a presentation from the LEP. They talked about disproportionately women being affected. Are we seeing that in Basingstoke? And could you give us some more information on that? That's my first question. And then I wanted to ask a bit more about the grant in relation to the green grant. You said you had examples. I wondered if you could just give us a couple or an example of that grant and how it's being used. Thank you, Jack.
So if I take your point around women and unemployment first, so the what we're seeing locally is that there's a lower unemployment rate for women than men in the borough. So the overall average for all age groups in Basingstoke Dean is 2.9%. For men, the rate is 3.2%. For females, it's 2.6%. So we're actually seeing a lower unemployment rate. Now, that doesn't necessarily indicate the issues that women might be finding within work to progress and earn equivalents with men. But actually, as I did have a look earlier around sort of gross weekly pay and how that plays out across a gender balance. Although men do earn more, the gap between men and women in Basingstoke is significantly lower than it is both at a UK and southeast level. So we are seeing a better picture here than in many areas for that. In terms of the how long unemployed 18 to 24-year-olds are in particular, don't have that data to hand. I think it is something that we can request from DWP in terms of that, whether it's been 3 months, 6 months, longer than that. And that's something I'll be happy to someone else in the team will need to pick up after tonight, but that is something that we can look to collate. And then in particular around the green grant scheme, were you talking about the low case one, the low carbon across the south and east? Was it that one? So
is that the latest grant? It was in one of your last slides. You talked about a new grant.
Yes, so that's the grant for businesses that enables them. And yeah, an example that has come through is as a manufacturing business based on the West Ham trading estate, who have completely redone all their lighting within their operation, so that they've moved away from traditional sort of high carbon emitting bulbs to LEDs and much lower emitting carbon efficient bulbs. So it's not changing the world, but it's making differences for smaller businesses. So yeah, that's a small example, and we hope that there'll be more significant investment from businesses going forward. And I guess the key thing I should say about the low case scheme is that it requires the business to match fund. So they need to be invested in the project as well. It's not just here's some money and do something with it. They really need to be co-invested in the work they're doing. So it does bring out the businesses who are trying to make a difference in terms of their carbon efficiency.
Thank you, Jack. Laura, if you have any more questions, can I come back to you, please? Yep. Okay. Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Jack, for a really thorough, good presentation. And sorry to see you leaving. Good luck in your new job. I just wanted to have a question on inward investment, really. I mean, the picture I see of the town centre at the top of town, it looks like we could do with a very large amount of inward investment. To what extent do you see the need to get external investment into the town, and how much do you think will be, if we have a recovery of the town centre, how much will that be, homegrown from within Basingstoke by Basingstoke people?
It's important when we think about inward investment that we don't just necessarily confine it to the town centre, and that actually we see the benefits on the town centre from investment that comes into other areas, whether that's particularly in Basingview because of its proximity, but also places like Chinham Business Park, Viables and other areas. And we do continue to see Basingstoke, we know that Basingstoke continues to be seen as an attractive investment opportunity, both in terms of its affordability compared to some of our neighbouring authorities, particularly as you move further towards London and up to Reading and Oxford. But we also know that in terms of sort of the scale of businesses and the growth of businesses within Basingstoke has remained pretty stable throughout the last 10 years. And I think there was a point you might have made earlier about sort of the loss of some of our high-tech businesses and businesses that have gone away. And actually, when we look at the data in terms of the number of businesses that employ over 250 people within the borough, that number has remained stable throughout the last 10 years, largely between 40 and 45 businesses. So although we do lose businesses, and there have been some high numbers and high profile, I should mention, like Shire and Thales and others, they are being replaced by businesses that maybe don't make the front news about, but are still very important. So your businesses like Tech Data, Reassured, UL, all of these actually are significant employers in the borough now, but maybe sort of go under the radar are a bit. I think looking at the town centre specifically, it's obviously a really difficult period for retailers in particular, and I do think there will need to be consideration about how a town centre works going forward in terms of its mixed use, what it's there for, what its purpose is. And I know that obviously there's work going ahead with the town centre master plan, which I believe there'll be an opportunity for information around that to come to this committee in the future about the milestones on that. I don't know whether Daniel or anyone would like to add to the town centre.
No, I think as Jack said, I think the confidence in investment at the moment is quite low, and I think that's why we are looking at kind of providing some incentives, but we want to time it right. We want to make sure, I think, that business have got the confidence to come back and invest in the town centre to support them. So we're kind of looking at a town and centre village fund, for example, to support kind of new businesses taking empty premises, but also supporting the existing ones. So something working there. But I think for me, it's about timing on this one, because we don't want to do something now when we know that it's not quite right. People are not, we're not back, to the confidence level that we had pre-COVID. So I think we need kind of, for Omicron, I think probably going to, whether it goes away or not, but I think to go back kind of to more of a stable, normal situation for then people to have the confidence to invest. But having said that, we have seen some new businesses, opening during the pandemic. Willow's coffee shop opened, Gabardines opened. We've got a new sort of gaming cafe as well, where the Red Line used to be. So I think, we are seeing new businesses opening, and they tend to be kind of the smaller independent ones, which is positive, because we know that kind of national chains retail, I think, tend to shrink. So kind of replacing that, with more independent, businesses locally grown as well, I think is a positive move. And I'm hoping, with our support, we can see more of that moving forward.
Great, thank you very much, Daniel. Okay, what I'd like to do now is move on to Councillor Konesko, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Jack and Daniel, for the presentation. I've got 3 questions, which are just dotted around on all slightly different subjects. We've spoken about the millions in central government supports that we've distributed to business in the borough, which is great. Obviously, there's been quite a lot of media coverage nationally this week about the amount of fraud that's been involved in some of those payments, again, on a national level. Just be useful to get a sense of how that's affected us in that, so what measures have we put in place to try and minimise fraud? And it's not just about being backward looking, but obviously we've got this ARG grant that we're distributing at the moment and hope to distribute more of in the future. So what are we doing to try and minimise fraud there? And have we done any analysis? Have we been asked by the Treasury to help them in terms of recovering any money? So that's the first question, sort of around fraud in those payments, and what our role in and our understanding of that is specifically within our borough.
Thank you, Councillor Konesko. Jack.
Yeah, so we don't have data at a local authority level to understand the sort of scale of fraud that's happened in terms of the grants we've particularly distributed. Every grant application that we do goes through a number of different checks. So not to get too technical, but there's a system called Spotlight and a system called NFI, and effectively they run checks around making sure that it's a legitimate business that's doing it. So using a number of data sources that both the government and local authorities have access to, but also the NFI does checks on the bank account to make sure that it is a legitimate business bank account that we're paying to, not an individual's bank account. We'll also take checks across our databases that we have access to where appropriate, and where we might be concerned about potential fraud, to make sure that we are not paying out to businesses that shouldn't be accessing the funding. In terms of recovering funding, we haven't specifically been asked to do that as an individual authority. We have, I think the only times we've been required to do it is where during lockdown periods where businesses have accessed grants but then acted again outside of the law in terms of what the lockdown restrictions were. So if they continue to operate when they shouldn't have been, or allowed people inside, but had access some of that support funding to enable them to keep going, that's the only times where we've specifically acted to take funding back.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Councillor Konesko, before we move on, I'd just like to bring in Councillor Rattigan, who I think has got something to add on this point.
Thank you, Andy. I'm appreciative of the question. The majority of fraud that was picked up by the Lords was on the loan scheme, and obviously we're not we're not involved in that, and that has had major issues on it. My understanding is that there have been 2 applications for grants from us that weren't right. I'm pretty sure that Lucy and Michelle didn't pay them out in the end. As Jack has alluded to, we have a checking system that is excellent, and obviously for a number of businesses, obviously they've got a business premises, they've got business bank accounts, so it was slightly easier for us as a borough council to ensure that there were less fraudulent claims. That doesn't mean that our hands are clean on it, and I am reliably informed from my 151 officer that there will be a wash-up meeting once all of the grant money is out, which will go back to audit and accounts to confirm our work on that. But I hope that helps.
Thank you. Councillor Konesko, if I can just ask you to ask one more question, because I've got other speakers, and then I'll come back to you at the end.
Yep. Okay, no problem. Second question then is, we spoke about the actual £1 million that we've got as a local authority specifically for the ERF pot, and that we haven't spent a huge amount of that just yet. What's the plan for that for this year and the future? Because I understand that budget isn't time bound like the government money is, so we can spend it over the next 5 years if we want to. So maybe that's one for Jack, maybe it's one for Ken, but it's sort of how are we looking at investing that over the next few years?
Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you again. Now, naturally, we will look to those who are suffering most to improve the quality of their businesses. I mean, I think there is no set schemes that we are wedded to. I think we will need to see where the recovery comes. Now, a number of small businesses, individuals actually, have suffered in the pandemic because they've got no support mechanism. They've got nobody available to them to deal with, payroll or benefits or lots of things. And I do think there will be a need for us to delve into the minutiae of businesses, because they're likely to be the ones who will suffer more in the long term and will perhaps sometimes take more time to recover. And as I alluded to already, many of those businesses might not exist, but those individuals will need to be upskilled, reskilled, so as they can go back and be dynamic again in an improving economic piece within the borough.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rattigan. Jack, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, all I would say is that what the last 2 years has provided us with is a decent amount of information and data about sectors that are struggling, individual businesses that are struggling, and I think it's brought us closer links with sort of advisory groups such as the Federation of Small Businesses, Chambers of Commerce, to have a better rounded picture about what's happening in the regional economy. And because we've delivered grant schemes, we are able to think about, well, where has that support most helped, and where are the things that we can continue to extend. So I mentioned something like the apprenticeship grant scheme. There's an option there if that is successful, if it shows that it is helping young people or people of any age to move into employment or be upskilled. That could be an option that we take forward. There's activity around business support that we could do around digital transformation, resilient support for businesses, those kind of elements that I think that are going to be longer term. And I think that's where the focus will lie more than individual grants giving up. But yeah, as Councillor Raskin said, we'll need to also think about those who are particularly impacted, both at the smallest and largest level.
Thank you very much, Jack. Councillor Dillow, please.
Yeah, it's just another question about the sector support section and the hospitality and travel and events and the ARG grants. I believe the deadline is the middle of next month, isn't it? I think, or something like that. Will payments not be made until the deadline, or are they being gradually rolled out now?
So payments are being made on a first come, first served basis. And actually, today we got to the point where we had fully allocated the initial amount of funding that we were looking to provide via the ARG. So that's both for the events and travel industry, but also the hospitality and leisure sectors. But we are now looking to allocate a further tranche of the ARG towards that scheme. So there should be further grants to be able to go out. But in terms of payment, it is happening at the quickest rate that we can, and those that applied first will get their funding through first. The point I'd make about that is going back to the fraud element. It does take a couple of weeks to get those checks back from the Spotlight and the NFI systems because they are being overwhelmed by demand across the country. So we have to wait until those checks are made before we authorise the payment. So yeah, that will take a couple of weeks.
Payments been made as yet because you're waiting for checks.
Some have already. I believe some have already gone out, but it's at a sort of lower level. We know through our system that we are up to a point of fully allocating the funding if all of those payments do get made. Yeah. There will be some that come back that we're not able to make, and then we'll be able to open up the scheme to some more businesses. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Dillo. Okay, Councillor Vaux, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jack and Daniel. It was a very interesting paper, and I think really good to see how we focused on areas like employment of young people and the efforts we're taking to try and help them get into the job market and things. But just thinking about the crossover between the LEP presentation and this one, and the three main competitive areas that were considered there that draw people in, whether they're international or otherwise. I think that they still would be things that bring us in. And the place shaping, i.e. the location, great place to live, I think is really interesting in your paper. And I think having been in the town centre when some of the events were going on, and how it did bring a huge amount of energy to the town and to the streets, I thought it was such a good investment on multiple levels, really, because, yes, it brought business to the shops and eating places and pubs and things, people coming in, but also it made people feel like this is a good place to live, and therefore that is really helpful as well. And I wondered how it talks about on page 8 of 10, it's got here right at the top, it talks about these events being funded by the Welcome Back Fund, and the challenge will be how to consider how we continue to deliver post-March 2022, and that the team had delivered 38 events since May 2021, and they're to be congratulated on that, because I think they've done a fantastic job. But how will that consideration happen, and do you think that we've got sufficient funding to help with this place shaping, making this a great place to live?
I think if I come in on this one, I think basically it's kind of exactly where the Economic Recovery Fund is for, to make sure, I think, we're able to sustain kind of activities like this. And I think, as always, we always look for opportunities for external funding. So, if there are opportunities through Arts Council, National kind of Heritage Lottery Funds, kind of whatever it is, basically, I think to access external funding. And also, we want to work more closely with businesses. I have to say, the Welcome Back Fund has forced us to deliver very, very quickly because of the time-bound element of the money. And I think, we want to take a bit more time to engage even further with the local business community to make sure that they also kind of work with us and delivering events and that sort of activities together, if you see what I mean. So we might be looking, for example, at a small grant fund, that would kind of sort of support businesses, with delivering events, kind of in town and village centres. Kind of we're looking at this at the moment, but I think, this is kind of where ultimately the Economic Recovery Fund, is to help us kind of enhance kind of the vibrancy of the town centre.
I think it's particularly interesting that places like the Games Cafe, places like that will be really attractive to young people, and I think encouraging that top of town, that area, that street right at the top. Now they've got lots of seating outside, greenery outside. It's beginning to feel more like an area that for recreation rather than a street that used to be a road and hasn't quite figured out what to do with itself yet. It's getting there. I think it's taking a long time, but it's getting there. I think, which is really good.
Yeah, and the outdoor seating, as you mentioned, as actually was funding through grant funding from the council.
Yes, I figured that from the presentations today. I think it's good stuff. I think it's all helpful. That they may be relatively small things, but I think they can have quite a big impact if businesses embrace them and make them, really invest in them as well, if you like.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Councillor Hall. Back to Councillor Canesco, please, for your third question.
Third and final question, Jay. Yes, thank you for the opportunity. A quick question actually on the accompanying paper. Section 5 on big page 13 talks about governance, and it mentions the Corporate Programme Board and the Economic Recovery Board itself. Now, I was just wondering who the members of those boards were and how they were appointed.
So, the Economic Recovery Board, first off, that is a meeting of a wide range of businesses and partners who what we attempted to do there is create a cross-section of our economy. So bringing in businesses that represent some of the priority sectors and some of those very important sectors in terms of hospitality and retail, but also advanced manufacturing, digital, professional services, and the sort of pharma and life sciences sectors, which are critical for the growth of our economy. Alongside a number of partners such as the LEP, such as the Chambers of Commerce, such as Winchester University, and ultimately the way we came to sort of make decisions around that was in engagement with Councillor Rattigan and internal staff, and engaging with businesses to see who would be interested in helping us to shape the future of the Basingstoke economy. It's really important to note it's a sounding board. It doesn't make any decisions. It doesn't tell us where our funding should go or how we should do certain things, but it does provide us with that sort of business voice to give us some perspective on some of our decision making. The Corporate Programme Board is an internal board which just oversees sort of all of the major projects across the council, make sure that they're on track in terms of the activity they're doing and spend and other things like that.
Thank you very much, Jack. Can I just bring in Councillor Rattigan, please, back on Councillor Canesco's question?
Thank you, Andy. I chair the Economic Recovery Board. It is a widespread view from across the borough and further afield. The reason it is useful is a cross-fertilisation. So we had our last meeting about skills, how we can upskill, reskill, and change people's views of certain jobs and roles. So we had one of the members of the board is in HR. So aligning what businesses can do to recruit the best, the finest, maybe just the most enthusiastic is useful. But also we get a sense so that where the large bits of our economy are going. So they rightly pointed out where there are issues. Obviously, has already been alluded to in the LEP and by Jack, that getting the right people into the right job is hugely important. Making Basingstoke and telling the story of Basingstoke, many of you will be much better articulators of why you live here than I will. But I think it is important just to understand why people have brought their businesses here, but many have brought their families, themselves, their friends and colleagues here. And it is vital that we get that, just those sparks of ideas that may be able to drive the economy forward when we've had such a blow, both in GDP terms, but obviously in unemployment terms. And as many have already alluded to, the fact that some areas of our town are not as well served in terms of customers, and the vacancies are stark, and nobody likes to see that. So we've had some great ideas, and I continue to think that it is of value.
And sorry, Chair, with the corporate programme board, the internal one, are there any council members, are any councillors who are part of that? And if so, should there be, given sort of the importance of the work that's being done here for our whole economy?
Many of the things that are flashed up at the town centre. We had a huge map on that at the Centre Court Hotel, and I think there was about 30 council members of that. I'm not sure the exact number, but there is a way of feeding into certain elements of it. Just this week, we've had a really great conversation about as a map about the leisure park. I'm quite happy to have people feed in new things. Obviously, at times there's a cabinet. Andy's always there, always questioning what we're doing and why we're doing it. The spending of the £1 million, I think, doesn't and will need to be scrutinised. And I would encourage Tony Jones to question us on that. So as we get not just everybody's buy-in, but we are getting the most for our money. There's no point in our borough funding something if we're not going to actually do something adequate with it. But I am happy to go through anything, as we've seen tonight, and my offer to Laura, when the white paper comes out on levelling up, we will be pitching for money and certainly be helping perhaps the LEP pitch for money to make an improvement in this borough. So my offer to be scrutinised and to be questioned, so as you feel confident in what we're doing, I'm happy with. But at the moment, it's mostly a member come and go world, as and when they see fit, mostly in terms of our budgets.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rattigan. I've got a hand up with Daniel Garner. Do you want to add something, Daniel?
Yeah,
or,
just kind of to specifically on the corporate program board, it's kind of officers only. So it's basically senior leadership team, and I think they review key projects regularly, and then I think then information is passed on for review by cabinet.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, unless anyone's got any other questions, okay, I think that's the end of that particular paper. I'd like to thank Jack Kennedy for all his service. Okay, with the Economic Recovery Board and his presentation tonight, and I'd like to say thank you very much to Daniel, who has got some pretty big shoes to fill, and also for Councillor Rattigan for accepting the invite to come along and be questioned by us all. So
thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. What I'd like to do now is move on to the work programme, if I may. Okay, so we have a copy of the work programme attached to the agenda. Okay, obviously 27th of January is tonight, so we've had those two presentations. We have a meeting on the 10th of February, okay, which we're planning the housing green conversion motion, okay, and also a COVID-19 motion. We are still in slight discussion with the portfolio holder, okay, Councillor Raffel, as to exactly what course of action, okay, he's going to take, whether he goes to a map first and then comes to us, okay. But as soon as I get any further information on that, I will let the committee know. Okay, so that is the meeting of the 10th of Feb. Then moving onwards to the 3rd of March, there is a local plan update again. Okay, I love these. Just to consider developing the updated new local plan policies prior to the Regulation 18 consultation, which would be, it's going to be a long evening. Okay, hopefully we can get the work done in an evening, because that will probably be a face-to-face meeting. Hopefully, okay. If not, I will. If I'm going to have another date, just in case we have an adjournment, I will let the committee know on that. Okay, closer to the time. And then the only other thing that we have is on the 9th of June, which is post-election. Okay, for again another local plan update to consider the draft spatial strategy and site-specific allocations prior to the Regulation 18 consultation. So again, a couple of really juicy meetings. Sorry, Councillor James. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Sorry, you're muted, Councillor James.
Thank you. Can you hear me? It was
Yes.
just in relation to the meeting on the 3rd of March, the local plan update.
Yes.
In relation to the papers that we will receive, obviously the last meeting was cancelled due to not having the right papers.
Yes.
And to be clear, I think what we're asking for, or what I would like to see, is an existing local plan and how the new policy looks in relation to the existing local plan, and having those changes so we can cross-reference the changes and understand obviously what was recommended by members in one section, what was the changes that were made in result of those consultations that took place against what does a local plan look like. And the other thing is, there was, in relation to the papers that we received, there were policies that were there. For example, one was on the River Loddon, but we hadn't received the policy, and in the document that members got, it said no comments received, but we hadn't received that. So how many policies were there that we hadn't received, and can you send those out prior to that meeting on in March, so we can then make comment to them or have a look at them prior to that meeting, please?
Tom.
Thank you, Chair. So hopefully you'll be aware, Councillor James, that there is actually the map obviously next Tuesday, and that's when obviously the team will be running through the policies in terms of the feedback we've received throughout this process, in terms of the EPH meetings and all the comments they've received directly, and just taking members through the changes that the portfolio holder has agreed to, if you like, in terms of the feedback. So Tuesday will be the first opportunity to look at that and discuss it. But then, of course, it's coming to EPH in March for that.
But what I was trying to say, Tom, is that in relation to the meeting that we were going to have, we had received a paper on what you were proposing as a policy against the change.
They'll all be shared for Tuesday, Laura. So you'll get all of those papers, and if any weren't circulated previously, again, the updated policies in full will be what are shared next week at the MAP, and also obviously clearly what comes forward to EPH in March.
Will we see? So obviously we all had an opportunity to discuss the policies beforehand and look at them. So an example, the policy on the River Loddon wasn't there. And what it said in the feedback was no comment from members. I haven't seen that policy. Can you circulate that to members before the meeting on Tuesday so we can have a look at that? And also, what I was struggling with was that we had the changes that you'd made, but I couldn't relate that to the existing local plan, and it wasn't marked up, so I could see how it looked different to what's it going to look like against the existing. Can you help members, because it's so messy at the moment? I'm really struggling with this.
Right. So sorry, Councillor James. Maybe I can clarify here. The reason why the meeting was cancelled was because the wrong appendix was attached to the paper. Okay, and there wasn't enough time to reissue the paper with the correct appendix. Okay, so that was the reason why that meeting was cancelled. I understand what you're saying, and please, if I can kind of paraphrase it, and please correct me if I'm wrong here. Okay, what you're wanting to see, okay, is the local plan policy. Okay, and then you want to see the changes that have been suggested to that policy and what it looks like now. Okay, and I'm sure that can be done through tracking changes. So therefore, if we're changing a word, okay, you want to know which word was in the policy, and maybe it's got a strike through against it, and what the new word is. Okay, I think that's where we're going, Tom. If that makes sense.
Yeah, my recollection is that that's normally the way we presented it previously with the track changes. But yeah, I'll certainly feed that back to the team. Yeah, I'll feed that back to the team for the Tuesday, and obviously, I'm sure they'll circulate that as soon as they possibly can.
Thank you, Stuart. What I'm wanting is the track changes. So
yeah,
I want to see what the original local plan said in the green box, and what it now says, what you're recommended against what our recommendations were as a committee. There's three sections to it, really, but also there was one that I was aware of, and I don't know if there's more, policy that you made comment on in the papers, which was the River Loddon, and I never saw that policy. Are there more that we didn't see? Because what it said in the comments on the papers we received, no comment made by members, but I never saw the paper. I don't know if other people did. And could you send us that policy through before Tuesday, so we have a chance to comment on it before Tuesday, I guess, please.
Yeah, well, I know that that Joe Bromley, for example, and Ruth are not in tomorrow, so I suspect the earliest you're going to get the papers will be Monday. But I will be following up with the team. So if there's any opportunity to get it out beforehand, then obviously we can make sure that comes out sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I really support Councillor James on this. A really simple before and after document with the old wording on the left-hand side of the sheet of paper and the new wording on the right-hand side of the sheet of paper would be really helpful to me, going forwards with DC. So yeah, I really would like to see something like that. It would be really helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Okay, there you go, Tom. Okay, there's a fair amount of work to be done over the weekend, methinks. Okay, so that's for the 3rd of March, and then obviously we have the 9th of June, which is again another local plan update. Okay, so does anybody have any questions on the local plan? Sorry, on the work programme. Yeah, don't ask me questions on the local plan. We'll do that in session. No, okay. Members, thank you very much for your attendance tonight. Okay, have a lovely evening. Okay, and I declare this meeting closed at